Joseon was not just another Korean dynasty. It was the political and cultural framework that shaped Korea for more than 500 years. Founded in 1392 and lasting until 1897, Joseon survived long enough to influence language, government, etiquette, education, social hierarchy, and even the way Koreans imagined proper behavior. When we talk about classical Korean culture, much of what we mean was either formed, refined, or institutionalized during Joseon. Its story begins with a dramatic transfer of power, but its real importance lies in what came after, the creation of a durable state that could rule the Korean peninsula through ideology, bureaucracy, ritual, and law. To understand Joseon is to understand one of the deepest foundations beneath modern Korean identity. Joseon emerged from the collapse of Goryeo, the older kingdom that had ruled Korea before it. By the late 14th century, Goryeo was weakened by internal conflict, elite rivalry, and military pressure. Into this unstable environment stepped Lee Seong-ji, a powerful general who became Taejo of Joseon. His rise was more than a change of rulers. In East Asian political thought, a new dynasty had to prove that the previous order had lost legitimacy and that a new moral order was necessary. Joseon's founders therefore presented their regime as a fresh beginning. They were not simply taking over Goryeo's institutions. They were building a state that would be more disciplined, more centralized, and more clearly guided by a new set of principles. One of the new dynasty's most important decisions was moving the capital to what is now Seoul. A capital is never just an administrative location. It is a statement about power, identity, and the direction of the state. By shifting the center of government away from the old Goryeo world, Joseon gave itself a new symbolic heart. Palaces, gates, offices, roads, and ritual spaces turned the city into a living map of royal authority. Over time, Seoul became the place where policy was made, officials gathered, ceremonies were performed, and elite culture developed. The decision still matters today because modern Seoul did not become central by accident. Its role as Korea's political heart was deeply rooted in Joseon's founding vision. Joseon also worked to define and secure the northern edges of the kingdom. Early rulers expanded authority toward the Amnok and Tumen rivers, which became natural boundaries in the north. This required campaigns against Jurchen groups and careful management of frontier regions. These borderlands were not empty spaces. They were zones of trade, conflict, migration, and negotiation. By strengthening control there, Joseon gave Korea a clearer territorial shape and reinforced the idea of a consolidated peninsula state. Borders mattered for defense, but also for taxation, identity, and administration. A dynasty that wanted to last could not merely rule the capital. It had to make its authority meaningful across mountains, provinces, rivers, and remote frontier communities. The central ideology of Joseon was Neo-Confucianism. This was not just a private philosophy for scholars. It became the moral architecture of the state. Neo-Confucian ideas emphasized hierarchy, duty, loyalty, education, family order, ritual conduct, and moral self-cultivation. In government, this meant officials were expected to be learned and disciplined, not merely powerful. In society, it meant relationships were understood through obligations, ruler and subject, parent and child, elder and younger, husband and wife. Joseon's rulers believed that a stable kingdom required stable moral relationships. Over centuries, these ideals shaped schools, families, ceremonies, law, and social expectations. The dynasty's power therefore rested not only on soldiers or taxes, but on a shared moral language. This Confucian turn also changed the status of Buddhism. During earlier periods, especially under Goryeo, Buddhism had held major cultural and political influence. Joseon moved in a different direction. The state discouraged Buddhism, reduced its public prestige, restricted institutions, and at times persecuted Buddhists. This did not erase Buddhism from Korean life. Temples, monks, rituals, and popular belief continued, often away from the centers of political power. But the official message was clear: the public order of the kingdom would be Confucian. This shows how deeply Joseon's reforms reached. The dynasty was not satisfied with changing the palace. It tried to reshape the moral hierarchy of society, deciding which traditions belonged at the center and which would be pushed to the margins. A major reason Joseon lasted so long was its bureaucracy. The dynasty developed administrative systems capable of governing the peninsula across generations. Officials, offices, records, examinations, provincial divisions, and legal procedures created continuity beyond the personality of any single king. This was crucial because long dynasties inevitably face weak rulers, factional struggles, succession disputes, and crises. Bureaucracy allowed the state to keep functioning even when politics became unstable. It also left one of Joseon's strongest legacies. Modern Korean administrative divisions and habits of official governance were shaped during this period. Joseon's influence is therefore not only visible in palaces and costumes. It is also embedded in the deeper machinery of the Korean state: paperwork, hierarchy, jurisdiction, and organized rule. Joseon also became a high point of classical Korean culture. Under its long rule, literature, science, technology, trade, education, and court culture developed in lasting ways. Stability gave scholars and artisans the space to create, preserve, classify, and refine knowledge. The dynasty's cultural influence reached beyond elite circles. Korean language traditions, dialects, etiquette, family customs, and everyday social norms all drew heavily from the Joseon world. This is why the dynasty's legacy feels so broad. A kingdom does not shape a civilization only through wars or borders. It shapes how people write, speak, greet one another, respect elders, understand learning, and imagine social responsibility. Joseon became a cultural mold that continued to influence Korea after the monarchy itself disappeared. Yet Joseon's history was not a simple story of stability and achievement. At the end of the 16th century, the kingdom was devastated by Japanese invasions in 1592 and 1598. The invasions failed to conquer Korea permanently, but they caused enormous destruction. Towns, farmland, records, cultural sites, and ordinary communities suffered. Even victory can leave a country weakened when the cost is so high. The wars exposed military vulnerabilities, disrupted the economy, and placed immense stress on the state. They also changed the kingdom's sense of the outside world. Foreign contact was no longer an abstract diplomatic issue. It had become an existential threat. The memory of invasion would influence Joseon's later caution, suspicion, and defensive posture. The crisis did not end with Japan. In the 17th century, Joseon was invaded from the north, first by the later Jin dynasty in 1627 and then by the Qing in 1636 and 1637. These invasions occurred during a major shift in East Asian power, as Manchu forces rose and transformed the regional order. Joseon was caught between old loyalties, new military realities, and the need to survive. The invasions were humiliating and forced the court to recognize that the balance of power around Korea had changed. After suffering attacks from both Japan and Manchuria within a few decades, Joseon became more guarded. The dynasty survived, but its worldview was scarred by the lesson that the outside world could bring catastrophe. After the Manchu invasions, Joseon entered nearly 2 centuries of relative peace and prosperity. This period allowed recovery, cultural development, and technological progress. But it also encouraged a more isolationist policy. Western observers later called Korea the Hermit Kingdom, a phrase that can be misleading if it suggests nothing was happening inside the country. Joseon was not inactive. It continued to govern, produce culture, refine institutions, and maintain social order. But it became increasingly determined to control outside influence. Isolation was not simply ignorance. It was a strategy shaped by painful experience. For Joseon's rulers, limiting contact seemed like a way to protect stability, preserve moral order, and prevent the chaos that foreign pressure had brought before. By the late 18th and 19th centuries, however, the dynasty's recovered strength began to fade. Internal strife, elite power struggles, social tension, rebellion, and growing international pressure weakened the kingdom. The systems that had once provided order could also become rigid. Neo-Confucian hierarchy had helped unify the state, but it could make adaptation difficult when the world changed quickly. Foreign powers were expanding, military technology was advancing, and East Asia was being pulled into a new age of imperial pressure and global trade. Joseon struggled to respond. Its long continuity became both a source of pride and a burden. In 1897, the old dynastic framework gave way to the Korean Empire, marking the end of Joseon's 5-century rule. Joseon's legacy is powerful because it operated on so many levels at once. It gave Korea a long-lasting capital in Seoul, strengthened territorial identity, built administrative traditions, elevated Neo-Confucian values, transformed religious life, and shaped language, manners, education, and family norms. It was a dynasty of impressive cultural achievement and durable governance, but also one of hierarchy, exclusion, trauma, rigidity, and eventual decline. That complexity is exactly why Joseon matters. It shows how a society can build order for centuries, survive invasion, turn inward for protection, and then struggle when history demands rapid change. Modern Korea was shaped by many later forces, but beneath them all sits the deep foundation of Joseon, the dynasty that built the classical Korean world. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.